On the Level podcast, your Masonic podcast. Join the hosts Billy McIntyre and Sam Earl Sedgey as they delve into the world of Freemasonry.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode 4 of On the Level podcast with your hosts Billy and Sam. How are you, Billy?
I'm great.
Oh, mate, it's been a good 2 weeks. We did a third degree in my favorite Blue Lodge, Frank and Nicole, 1170, and it was a great third degree. The third degree is where you get raised to become a Master Mason, and the candidate was a top bloke, and it was a good day. We had a bit of an emergency during the degree where there was a bit of a long pause, so I gave a bit of history, and that was really good because it tied in with the third degree. And then we had this. You were there. We were in Clinton Lodge. We were in the Clinton Lodge.
Clinton, yeah.
And we had a fantastic cryptic council day with a lot of candidates, and it was an absolute pleasure to watch. And we did the Royal Master, the Select Master, and we did a Super Excellent degrees for the Cryptic Council. And you, as if people are not aware, is the most illustrious Grand Master of the Council of Cryptic Masons of the state of Illinois. So, how's your week been, Billy?
It's been great. It's really busy. We're ramping up and going towards our grand sessions of the Cryptic Council, and that'll be my last hurrah. I'll run that meeting, and then my successor, we assume it'll be Jeff Estes, will be taking over, and he'll be a good man. He's going to do a good job. But, this last couple months, they just keep you running. Every weekend I have something going on. And that's good, though. We're getting stuff done, and I'll be giving awards out to the 3 youth groups, the DeMolay and the Job's Daughters and the Rainbow Girls. We'll go to their awards night, and we'll give them a presentation with the one we pick as the most outstanding Mason or youth group leader, and then we'll give them a check for some money because we always make a donation to them. So we got that coming up. And like I said, we're just, it's funny that you're more busy the last couple of months than you are out the whole time.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is our interview today is based on is it the Master Councilor? Is that what they call them?
State Master Councilor.
Yeah, the State Master Councilor of DeMolay. So the big head honcho of DeMolay. We have an interview with him. And for those who don't know what DeMolay is, it's named after Jacques DeMolay, who was the according to a lot of people, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who was burnt on a stake in 1314, and the order is it's a youth organization in building the leaders of the future, giving leadership skills, confidence skills. Now, the State Master Councilor, he's actually quite young, isn't he? He just became a Mason, and he's in his early 20s. Am I right?
He's 20, I believe. Yes,
he's 20. Okay, and he's a Master Mason now as well, which is fantastic. So welcome to the fraternity. And he's quite an impressive chap. Now, the history of the Knights Templar that's really interesting in that period was the fall of the Knights Templars through the vicious and malicious devious ways of King Philip of France. Some call him the Iron King, some call him the Philip the Fair, and his advisors, one particularly called de Nogre. They were looking to become, for the crown, the French crown, to become more of a it was kind of like the start of the authoritarianism and becoming more autocratic and away from the Catholic Church. If you know your history, they actually King Philip the Fair actually sent a bunch of his thugs with the Nogre to ambush the Pope, and that was Pope Boniface in the early 1300s, and they literally, beat him so badly to a pulp when they captured him in the south of France, and it was unheard of a Christian king actually capturing Boniface, and actually accusing Pope Boniface of just some amazing heretical accusations, very similar to the accusations of the Knights Templar. And when the town which the Pope was held in France, the townspeople rebelled and freed the Pope against the Nogre's thugs and soldiers of the king's men. And so the Pope managed to escape. However, after 8 days, he died of the wounds and the bodily harm that was caused by the king's men, the French king's men. And so what you have to understand in that timeline is if this happened today, you'd have had like 24-hour news feeds and 2-hour, 1-hour updates. You probably have a few mobile phone pictures of seeing the Pope imagine seeing the Pope being beaten up, the current Pope being taken or the previous Pope being taken by the French president, which is unheard of. And it's like he just literally, his musclemen are battering him, and then the news comes and that the people of this town in France have liberated the Pope, and now he's dead. Now, if that news came out, it would have been a shock, a massive scandal.
It'd been a worldwide uprising.
It would have been a worldwide uprising. The prime minister, the president, would have had to resign. The world leaders would have condemned it. It would have been a huge, huge thing with the news cycle that we have, and everyone will be talking about it. But back then, there's no internet, there's no phones, there is no cars or planes. You have horses, carts, and you got your feet. And messages would take days, if not months or weeks, to get the news to spread out. So that 8 days is actually a very, very long time in our world today. And so when all this happened, the King of France, King Philip the Fair, was able to impose and elect his own Pope, which was Pope Clement, in France without him going to the Vatican for it to be decided by the cardinals and have the white smoke or black smoke come out. So this new Pope never set his foot in Italy. He was a puppet Pope. And this was a massive schism, because once the word got out, it took probably a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months for it to spread around Europe that Pope Boniface had died. And then there's a new Pope installed who's never been to Italy, and all that information came out. It can take 6 months for a year for all of that to get around Europe. There was a shock. Well, the first questions the other kings would have, because remember, back then, the popes had a lot of power. They were the ones who would have to bless the marriages between different kingdoms. They would excommunicate kings who weren't faithful to the cause or did a harm to another Christian brother or weren't playing ball. Popes had a lot of power, a lot of influence then, more so than today. You could argue that they had a bit of an iron grip around Europe, and that's what kept the peace between these Christian kingdoms was the Catholic Church and the Pope. Some may argue at that time they had probably maybe too much power. And the previous Pope that died, Pope Boniface, he was old school. He wanted to unite Europe under the papacy, and he wanted the papacy to not only have the spiritual command of the continent, but he also wanted the military command. He wanted to have the physical realm as opposed to the temporal realm, and unite Europe. And this was really in the time of the Crusades, and it was coming from a school of thought of how fractious the Crusader states were, and how difficult it was to actually do a crusade. And this is a time where they had lost the Holy Land, and
Right.
losing the Holy Land was a huge blow to Christendom in
Well,
Europe.
if I'm correct, is that the loss of the Holy Land, wasn't that one of the first and basically the only big battle the Knights Templars had lost at that point, right?
So, when at this period in basically the 1300s, they lost the Holy Land like in the late 1200, I think 1270 or 1280. I have to go back and check the actual dates, but they were finally kicked out of Acre, and they were thrown out, and the Templars only had Cyprus, and they had lost a couple of crusades before that, some major crusades, and they had lost with Jerusalem, and it was really King Richard the First, and we're now going back many, about over 50, more than 50 years now, a long time, where King Richard the First Lionheart came and had a successful crusade, but wasn't able to get to Jerusalem and negotiated peace between the Crusader kingdoms and Saladin. He managed to build a fortified satellite outpost, which was, as what we know today as Cyprus, and he was very successful in claiming back a lot of the coastal areas of the Holy Land, and so he had Acre, Jaffa, and all these other places, and so he was very successful. However, beyond his time and beyond that, many decades later, even Edward the First in England, who literally, what was really interesting about this point, Edward the First, the time when this happened, when Pope Boniface died, was kind of like in line in time with when it was a few years after he died, when the Knights Templars were accused of what they were done, which was a few years later. King Edward literally died like 30 days later, and my contention is King Edward first never got the news. His son got the news, and his son, Edward II, was one of the worst kings of England. Anyway, but even Edward didn't believe all the stuff was going on, that Philip the Fair, which was one of his opponents, one of his threats, believed that he was the first Christian king to have created a puppet pope, and this was actually a schism. So to your answer, it was basically pretty much the end of the Crusaders, and they lost the Holy Land. And we have historical facts that they were actually trying to build another crusade, to reclaim the Holy Land. And we can go all the way in the future, in 50, 60 years, where King Henry, who won the Battle of Agincourt, there is debate that if he hadn't died of dysentery, and what's really interesting is a lot of English kings and European kings at that time died of dysentery. I have my own theories about that. He would have not only unified the impossible, which he would have done, he would have unified all of France, and England would have been one nation, which would have been huge. He would have had the ultimate superpower. And what people don't understand back then is that this whole France versus England was really a French argument. You have to understand that William the Conqueror in 1066 conquered the Anglo-Saxons, and since then it was really, a French feud between French powers who dominated England and France, and it was about unifying the crown to have one crown running both England and France. And if Henry didn't die of dysentery, there are arguments that he was planning for a crusade to reclaim the Holy Lands again. And that was like way after all of this happened. But anyway, if we skip back to where I was going, Prince, so when the new Pope was anointed, it made a massive schism, never set into Rome, which is huge. So imagine all the politicking of the cardinals in Rome and the power base of Rome, sending out messages to cardinals all around Europe and trying to keep the peace. Now, the problem Rome had is it had to abide by it because it happened so fast and they couldn't basically go against something that happened. And so it was really a race to who controlled the news, who controlled the information. And Philip the Fair controlled it all. And he became extremely powerful and extremely dangerous because what Philip said would go, and then the Pope, this particular Pope, would nod and go. Now, the interesting thing is there were moments of lights of attempts of independence. The Pope did try to regain his control and power of the papacy, but failed deliberately. And we know that because he actually had absolved the Knights Templars of all the false accusations, which were false. And we'll get into that in the historical episode of how these Christian warrior monks who gave their lives to Christ, literally, could not have done these accusations. It was not possible. And I can go through that factually once we do a Knights Templar episode. But anyhow, it got to a point where whatever happened, regardless of them being absolved by the Catholic Church, and we have those documents now, I think it was for the Chelan parchments and stuff like that, where we have proof that the Pope actually absolved them. King Philip the Fair, he needed to get rid of the Templars for a couple of things. A lot of people say, well, he owed them a lot of money. The Knights Templar were the Catholic Church, or what I would say the Pope's army. They would answer only to the Pope. This was the Pope's SAS Delta Force that were everywhere. They were everywhere around France, everywhere around England. They had commanderies everywhere. And imagine you have an alien military force that only speaks to and listens to the Pope, that's actually on your land. And these are not just random soldiers. These are some of the best fighters in Europe. I mean, these are your super elite, hardcore killers who worship Christ and practice the art of war to fight the enemies of Christ. It was a deadly combo, and we have these kind of combinations throughout history, like the samurai, the way of the samurai. The Bushido way, the link between the warrior spirit, you had the samurais who were amazing warriors. You had the Bushido monks with their naginatas, which were really, really insane. You have the Hindus, you had the Sikhs who have this path of the warrior type of, thing in their culture. So if you look at different histories and different cultures, you have those kind of spiritual warriors, which are extremely dangerous because they have absolute no fear, no resolve. They're there to die for their God and their deity, and they're highly trained and highly skilled. Makes them very dangerous on the battlefield, when medieval warfare was all about morale and wavering and routing and rallying again and routing again and breaking. It was a very interesting way of combat that even today you have a lot of that about morale is extremely important, which units break and give up before the other unit, all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, just to wrap my historical segment up and get back to the DeMolay youth group, which is what this is all based on. Jacques DeMolay, apparently the last Grand Master, died on the stake, and there's a lot more to it. There are arguments, there are cases, and there are documents, historical ones, that claim that the Knights Templar continued post Jacques de Molay, and we'll go into that in a different episode. And the Knights Templar, order managed to survive all the way to the modern day, and we'll talk about that. There are arguments that our Freemasonry is derived by the Knights Templars, and it's the order that continued the Freemasonry and actually spread it across the world and until the unification of the United Grand Lodge of England. So there are many avenues that we can talk about and explore in the future, factually, based on facts.
Well, I would like to. I think what you're saying is that, and not only fascinating, but true from everything that I know. But I also think that at that time, it almost had to be that the world thought that the Knights Templar were gone, because as far as the Knights Templar was concerned, I don't think they got the memo that that the Catholic Church didn't find him guilty, because that was kept hush hush. They didn't want that to get out at all. So as far as they were concerned, everybody had turned on them. The people that they had served and the other kingdoms, far as they're, like you said, there is no communication, mass communication, and there's no way to, quickly get the information out. So as far as they're concerned, their whole world had come crashing down. So they had to, if you want to call it that, end the Knights Templar. Even when they went underground, it was better for them to look like they were gone.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the problem they had was one of the Grand Masters was burnt to the stake, and the problem you have in that age and that time is negative media or negative slurs and negative implications stick. They stick, and stick a lot harder than they did today, because you don't have multiple sources. You don't have news outlets or news agencies that will give an opposing view. Once a view came out from the church was the information service, or the king was the information. You would only get one point of view. So it was very rare for you to know anything better unless you saw it firsthand. And those are very rare sights. So what happened is, yes, they did, well, we'll get into the facts of how they went underground and look at the actual facts of these are the probabilities. Look at all these historical facts. The weight of the facts that we have now is overwhelmingly on this end, and we have to break down that and go through it, step by step, methodically, like a fine tooth comb. But at the same time, what people don't realize as well, and the reason why they were protected, like give example, the reason why the Templars were protected, and there's a good argument, a strong case that the order continued and survived, is the time when they arrested the Knights Templar in France. There were supposed to be 5,000 Knights Templars, and they had their fleets, and they had loads of money and treasures and all that, because it wasn't just just a bunch of warrior monks. They had a banking system and everything around that. They had agricultural lands. When they went to arrest them, out of the 5,000 that were in France, only 500, and most of them were the older Templars, were captured. 4,500 were gone. Boom, disappeared. Disappeared. It's like they never existed. The money gone. Everything gone. And across Europe was the same. They couldn't find anything. How's that possible?
Well, not only the money, but also all the artifacts that they had collected and everything that had a lot of power.
And the Templars themselves, they just went. I mean, we're talking about, imagine you have 4,000 or 5,000 and you only find 500 of them. I mean, that's insane. Like, what happened to 90% of them? They went. Now I can go into more of where they went and go for facts and
we don't have time for all of it today.
We've got 7 minutes till we jump in and talk about the DeMolay youth group. But I want to leave these questions for other people to look into, and hopefully for them to research. But here's one thing that I want to leave people that's not really spoken about around the world. And you have all these, different people who love talking about Knights Templars. That age was a horrible age to live in. It was horrible in the sense of very different from here. Like if you're at least if you're in America or in Europe and some parts of the world now, it doesn't matter what station you're born in. There is a chance for you to do well or live
Mm-hmm.
your dreams or live somewhat of your dreams or get to somewhere comfortable. Back then, if you were born a peasant, it's very likely you would die a peasant. If you were a serf, you were a serf. If you were a son of a soldier, it's very likely you might just be another soldier. Going up ranks was very tied to who you were born to, as opposed to your ability. There
Mm-hmm.
might be some rare instances where merit brought you up, and you gained that nobility by taking out another nobility or rank or family by combat and duel and prowess or whatever. But it was very rare to move from your station. So it was really your birthright. And in the noble houses and in the merchant class houses, and in a time where it was very important to have 12 to 16 kids because half of them or two-thirds of them would die in the first 3 or 4 years or 6 years through all sorts of things, where today it's unthinkable because we have something called modern medicine. A cold could have killed a baby, or stillbirths, or pregnancies, or the mother and the baby would have died during childbirth because of the archaic ways they had the medicine back then was extremely rudimentary and extremely backwards, and actually some of the medicines were actually counterproductive in the way the doctors did stuff that we found out today. Even if you just relatively go back to like 200 years ago when people used to use leeching on themselves and draw blood and
Yeah.
some crazy stuff. But my point being is, it was such a dark time that if having a family and building a family and your heirs were really important. So it was very common. It was very common that you'll have multiple sons and multiple daughters, and the daughters will be given out in dowries. And if the first son survived or second son survived, whoever was the eldest son, if there were like a bunch of boys, 4 or 5, 6 boys, which was very common back then, when the head of the family, which was usually the patriarch, passed away, died, everything would go to the first son or the eldest son. Everything. Now, in today's terms, it'll be your house, the car, the keys, dad's land, if he had anything. It will all go to and then the siblings, your brothers and sisters wouldn't get anything. Everything goes to the first son. So what happens to son number 2, 3, and 4, and 5, or if there were more? They're kind of screwed. And so you either try and, do the Game of Thrones, let's try and kill the first son so I get everything, which may have happened now and then. But remember, there were some people where it was like, well, a lot of them, what they did is they joined the knightly orders. They went gallivanting to create their own fame and claim and renown and create their own lands. And being noble sons, that helped a bit. But a lot of them joined the knightly orders. And the Knights Templars was like the Delta Force. So if you imagine, like in the American army, you've got the normal army, which was one knightly order, like let's just say the Hospitallers or the Teutonic Knights or another knightly order. But the Knights Templar were they were the best of the best. They were the hardcore. And if you wanted to be the best, And remember, a lot of these people, they only lived up to the age of 30. Or 35 or 40, and that was a long life. Most of them died in their early 20s or mid 20s. I mean, as I said, King Henry of the fourth or the fifth, he died of dysentery at the age of 35, and if he had survived another 10 years, the Holy Land may have been, a Christian state again. So a lot of things happen where people just fell off really, really fast compared to today when modern medicine gets that. So my point is, before I can wrap up, is when King Philip the Fair made these accusations to the Knights Templars, he accused the noble sons of Europe, because you can only be a Knights Templar if you're a noble. and then everyone else would have become a Knights Templar sergeant. There was a merit system. Some from lower ranks did become Knights Templars, but mainly it was the noble sons of Europe. So he damned the noble sons of Europe, and that's why there was a shock in the system, because this wasn't some sort of cult, obscure cult being recruited from obscure places. It was literally one of the main pools were the noble sons of all of Europe, noble sons of England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and there was a core shock. And so it was class systems, aristocracies who knew all of this was absolute bollocks and just crap, protected the Knights Templars and helped them create a underground network that has survived today. But we'll get into that in a later day. And out of all this, you have the Jacques DeMolay, the DeMolay boys, which have been named after Jacques DeMolay, the apparent last Grand Master of the Knights Templars who burnt at the stake. And it's a fantastic youth group that's based on building leadership, reinforcing the importance of family, motherhood, your mother, your father, and passing on old traditions of family continuity and the importance of your elders and building leadership within these young men and giving them tools to really go out in the world and give them the confidence to in whatever they want to do into being leaders. And that's what I've got to say.
What we need to remind people that this was an order that was made by Masons for the youth to give them the tools they need to be a better man.
That's right.
And so that's something to keep in mind for the people that don't know that's listening to this, because it's very fascinating. And this is a very good interview. The gentleman that we have is outstanding speaker, and I think we'll be having him back quite a bit.
Absolutely. I was blown away, and some parts were very touching. And I guess, Billy, any last words before we get into the interview?
No, I'm ready to roll.
All right, welcome back to On the Level podcast. And it's a great privilege and a great pleasure to have the State Master Councilor of the State of Illinois, Ben Maybury. Hello, Ben. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Sam?
I'm very good, very excited. Just before we start, this is kind of like really special because in episode 2, the most worshipful Grand Master of the State of Illinois, David Morgan.
Indiana.
Of India. How did I mix that up? How did I mix that up? Let's keep this in because it's going to be a working joke basically. But yes, the most worshipful.
It seems like it is.
Yeah, well, I didn't say his name though, so it could have been the other one, but no, it's not. The most worshipful Grand Master of State of Indiana, David Morgan. We had an interview with him, and he goes how he started long time ago as a DeMolay boy, and then joined Freemasonry, and how his father was one, his grandfather was one, his great-grandfather was one. So without further ado, Billy, do you want to start it off?
Well, I would love to. Ben, we would like to just start out as, how old were you when you got into DeMolay, and how did you get started in that?
So when I was about 11 years old, I was I was a little bit of a pain in the butt, and my dad went around his lodge and was like, "Oh my God, my son is such a pain in the butt," and he met my chapter dad at the time, Taz Wolfsfeld, and the age to join is 12, so I had to wait like 2 or 3 weeks before I was old enough to join. But they brought me around. I met all the guys. They liked me. And just like Masonry, they voted on my petition. I got initiated, and then I became a member. So I was initiated about a week after my 12th birthday on March 19th, 2017.
That's awesome. Now, you speaking of Taz, so I guess you've dealt with him all the way through.
Oh, yeah. Taz is like a dad to me. He has always been there to support me. He has always been someone who has pushed me to be better, someone who has expected the highest level of quality from me. And I've been very happy that I've gotten to become part of his family.
Yeah, Taz is my friend, and so he's my friend. I can say this, so maybe he'll listen to it someday. Taz is crazy. So you have to be crazy, too, to be around him that long.
Yeah, just a little bit. When I was 13, my father unfortunately passed away, and lived with Taz for a little bit. So getting to live in an environment with him, I definitely think I became a little bit crazier.
Taz, when you listen to this, I hope you know we love you.
No, absolutely. So for those who are listening in and are not Freemasons and are unaware of the Order of DeMolay, give a description. What is DeMolay? What does it entail? And what do you do? What is it?
Yeah, so, there's the basic boring elevator pitch. DeMolay is an organization for young men ages 12 to 21. And we teach, business skills. We teach leadership skills. We teach you how to be a young man so you can, become a man and be confident in your abilities. But it's more than that, To me, it is and always has been a family. It's always been somewhere where I'm surrounded by people who love me, who give me the freedom to find out who I am and let me express myself in a way that I can be comfortable with. And without that, without the trust that I have in my brothers, I would never have gotten to come and be where I am today.
That's incredible. So how would you, now you went on and become a Mason. How would you compare the DeMolay Brotherhood to the Masonic Brotherhood? Is it a lot the same or is it somewhat different?
It's very similar, but also very different. We have the shared experience of going through our degrees together and getting to experience that shared experience, which binds us. Mm-hmm. We are tied together by our obligation.
Sure.
But at the same time, because we are so young, we change so rapidly. I am not the same person that I was when I was 12.
Right.
If you take, 12, 13, 14, all those are different bends.
Sure.
As opposed to now, I'm 20 years old and I'm more or less the same guy I was when I was 18 and I decided to join Masonry. So there's a lot more change.
Growing. Yeah,
well, you never quit growing.
Right.
But there's much more variation in DeMolay. The speed at which you watch the people around you grow is insane. And you never stop and realize it until you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, who even is that guy? As opposed to Masonry where, I've known these guys, I've known a lot of these guys for years. I'm very familiar with my lodge. I've been around them for over a decade now. And I've always, they're pretty much the same guys that I met when I was 10 years old.
Sure. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, you're saying that the difference is you're growing up with these guys. So you have that bond as well as the brotherly bond.
Yes.
That's amazing. What's really interesting, the concept of DeMolay, is you have something that's very similar to joining a Freemasonic lodge, and it's a body that's recognized, I believe, by the Grand Lodge of the state of Illinois and throughout the USA, and it's a place where. Now, my question is: do you have to be a Master Mason's son to join, or can anyone join DeMolay?
Anyone can join DeMolay as long as you are 12 years old and you believe in deity.
Perfect.
A lot of people find out about it because their fathers are Masons. I was lucky enough to find out about it through my dad, but I have friends who have joined, and those friends have no Masonic heritage. They just happen to know me, and I gave them a petition.
Now, what's really interesting, just from my observations, is when cause in the past half a decade, I've seen a lot of these young men grow up and become men, and now are going to conferences and standing on podiums and giving these fantastic speeches and they exude this fantastic confidence, and I think that's had a massive benefit, I think, in their lives. I mean, how's that affected their abilities through education, through getting jobs? Is there a distinct connection between what you do through DeMolay and how these men grow up and go and do great and good things?
Absolutely. During high school, my high school had a very strong emphasis on giving presentations. Mm-hmm. So I was one of the kids who was able to walk up in front of my class, and I was never nervous. I was never self-conscious, and it gave me the opportunity to grow. In October of last year, I got the opportunity to speak in front of the entire Grand Lodge.
Oh, wow.
And I don't remember quite how many people were in that room, but it was the biggest crowd I've ever seen in my life, and
yeah,
I wasn't nervous about that at all. I walked up there, I said my piece, I said my thank yous, and it was like I was talking to a group of friends. And it's the same thing when when I'm at an interview for a job. They ask me questions, and I have complete transparency with them. I'm not nervous about anything because I know that the experience that I have is more valuable than most.
Oh, well said.
Yeah. So it gives you the confidence. So you guys work a lot on speaking and stuff like that.
Oh yes, undoubtedly.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think a lot of people, if they knew more about it, not only the kids as a 12-year-old would want to be part of something like this, because I think that's what the world's missing. But not only that, but if some of the parents knew the skills that their kid could get and probably help them to do better in school and get maybe raise their ACT scores and stuff up. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot to be gained there.
Yeah, so it's helped my writing in school the most. Because I have so much experience speaking, I know when to pause at the right times. I know when to stop. I know when I'm asking myself a question. And it drives my sisters absolutely nuts because they'll hear me in my room at 11 o'clock when I'm writing a paper, and I'll be talking to myself. And every time I pause, I know, okay, time for a comma. Every time I stop, period, that kind of stuff. And it's helped my writing skills. It's obviously helped my speech skills. I wouldn't be here if it hasn't helped my speech skills. But yeah, it's been a really unique experience.
Is there a fee that you have to pay yearly to be a DeMolay boy, or is there no fees?
So it's a lifetime membership. Most jurisdictions do somewhere between a $35-$50 range for their initiation fee. But once you're in, you're in. You're a brother for life, and we are, if you stop coming for 5 years and you come back, we're happy to greet you, and we are always super excited to see you.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
So just like anywhere between $35 around the ballpark, and that's the only dues you pay for life. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
That's correct. That's incredible.
That's incredible. No, I've had a few connections. I've seen some of the great stuff in my local area, taking the boys out to bowling, actually going to, I think, one DeMolay event where there are some fun activities for the boys to do. You have the counselors. Do you want to quickly just explain what it's like in a DeMolay meeting? Who are the people running the councils? Who are the people doing the work and the relationship between them and the kids and all that kind of stuff?
So everything is run by the members. And that is to say, when we get into our meetings, we have our master counselor, who is effectively the president. He is the presiding member. He has committees, that work for him. So that committee is a mixture of members and adults, because we are still, 12 to 21-year-old young men. Right. And we need time to learn. So having those adults there to guide us while still allowing us to retain control is really how we get things done. It's how we learn. It's how we are able to plan events. It is how we are able to set meetings. In DeMolay, we run things by Robert's Rules of Order. So I know how, in a business meeting, to make a motion. I know how to run discussion. I know how to run a meeting. I know how to really take care of everything that I would need to take care of if I ran, a multi-million-dollar business as well.
That's cool.
No, it's phenomenal. I remember I went up. No, I was going down because I was going to Gen Con. I came down for a speech about the gaming industry, and I think you were there, Ben, as well. And it was great to see all these young men who are interested into the gaming world and asking these pertinent questions. And personally, I've never seen anything but great stuff on DeMolay, and some of the spoken words they do, the memorization they do, is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal at their age. In terms of the memorization work and speaking these fantastic words and odes to, like, I remember one thing that made a lot of grown men kind of like choke was, I believe there was this ode to motherhood and mothers, and that was quite touching. So there's a lot of, seems to be a lot of respect, as you said, deity, but also family, respect to family, and respect to your parents and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of like entrenched in kind of like the ritual. Am I correct?
Oh, yes. So what you're referring to, the Ode to Motherhood, is our flower talk, which is a public ceremony, and it goes over our first main precept, which is love of parents, love of family. And it talks about how important our relationship with our mother is. It talks about how she, above anyone, will always be there for you. She, above anyone, is there to love and make sure you succeed. It is one of my favorite pieces of ritual, and I hate that I'm not able to give it, because I'm such an emotional person that I would never be able to get through it without breaking into tears.
No,
right. I love my mother so much, and just that little piece of ritual, it makes me feel closer to my mother every time I hear it, even if I haven't spoken to her in a week because I'm busy or, we just happen to not be able to see each other.
In this day and age, and even when I was growing up as well, in my entire life, having for someone like me as a teenage boy, growing up through adolescence and getting to the age of 21, having, and for many of us, because a lot of our, this new age where the family unit is shrinking, whereas before, if you just go back 100 years or 80 years or even 70 years, there was a bigger family unit. Your uncles and your aunties lived closer towards yourself. You had grandparents that were either in the same house or within walking distance. And a lot of things have dramatically changed in just the past, relatively 50, 60 years, let alone 100 years. And so with the family kind of like disconnected, and more of us having still aunts and uncles and grandparents, but more further away as technology shortens our distance through Zoom or through the internet or from making phone calls. We're more further away, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, from that traditional family mechanism. So not having the uncle or the auntie or your cousins or your grandparents to reinforce sometimes questions you may have as kids, or that reinforcement about your mother and all that kind of stuff. Some boys do get lost, rightly or wrongly. They may go down the wrong path because they don't have that reinforcement. But let's just say their mum, let's say their mum's a stay-at-home mum. What if their mum is a full-time working mum and dad is a full-time working mum? What if it's a single parent household, father? So there's so many things that are so different between just the past couple of decades, if not half a century or century, that those types of reinforcements which were there before are no longer there. And something like DeMolay, with having this kind of ritual that reinforces that tradition, but also has really has continued the wisdom. I call it common sense wisdom passed through the generations. There's a reason why we're not beating each other up with sticks and stones anymore, and there's a reason why we have, instead of me coming to your house and taking, pillaging your goods, and you coming to me and pillaging my goods, we have now something called business and trade and all sorts. We have more layers of civilization than ever before. But through all this technology and through all this fantastic innovations, I feel sometimes we lose a part of ourselves, and that to me sometimes is family. And even me, with I'm in Illinois and I have my wife and boy. When he grows up and he's going through his trials and tribulations, and he's becoming a man, and let's say dad's not there because dad's traveling for work and mum's there, just having someone else but dad reminding his son about motherhood and why mum's so important, having that speech that's been given through the generations, that's been crafted, and having, as you said, you can't go through it because tears bring it, that kind of independent reinforcement today is so much more stronger and so much more needed than ever before. And that's why, DeMolay, I think, is very close to my heart in the sense of you have still maintained those traditions. And, there are a lot of pressures and challenges that mothers have today that were not there 50 or 60 or even 100 years ago. They had different challenges, of course, maybe mortality rates, maybe all that kind of, but with the new age we're in comes with, like in every age, there are new different challenges. And so that to me speaks volumes, that there is a separate noble entity like DeMolay that reinforces something that, and I watched through that, and there was a lot of tears going along, even, very older men who were thinking of their mothers. And that to me is so key for young men, and to memorize it. And once you've memorized it, that bondship you have with your mother and understanding just becomes even more tighter. I think that's important. And so are those some of the precepts of DeMolay? Strengthen family, strengthen deity, creating confident business leaders, whether they want to be, confident in business or medicine or in the practice of law or public service. Is that kind of like the general kind of like theme? But at the same time, giving responsibility. That's why, as you said, the boys, they make decisions, and you do have the adults who are there to, I guess, make sure there isn't absolute chaos. You don't have a Lord of the Flies moment, basically, but they have that ability to, as you said, understand the real world, how to cooperate, how to get on with each other. Are those all sorts of things that you guys try to do?
Yeah. So our precepts are exactly like you said. The general idea is to create tomorrow's leaders today. Our marketing campaign is "The Road Begins Here," and what that means is kind of like what you're saying: the road to practicing medicine, the road to becoming a lawyer, a public servant, the road to a strong, independent man who is able to work and live a happy, fulfilled life. It all starts here. It all starts in DeMolay. It all starts in this family that we have built, and it starts here. It starts with you.
That's awesome, mate.
Yeah, it sounds like, honestly, this needs to be something that we really try to get out, because that's what the world, if not the world, America needs to hear. That's the stuff we've been missing. You know, I don't want to feel like the old fuddy-duddy, in the room that says, back in my day. But the farther life goes on, and you'll see that, I'm assuming it won't change, then things just keep getting worse, or it seems that way. And I mean, those qualities are not taught enough anymore.
No.
Yeah, so I like to think about it as the world isn't getting worse, it's getting more confused. I think nowadays people are struggling to hold an identity. I think a lot of people struggle with their sense of self. And I think that organizations like DeMolay, organizations like Freemasonry, are designed to have that third place. They're designed to reinforce that solidarity of who you are as a person, as a man, as a brother. And I think that amongst all the chaos and confusion of who you are, as Sam said, people get lost and people make poor choices, and sometimes people aren't entirely sure how they are going to be the best version of themselves. And I think that's what DeMolay and Freemasonry are about, is finding the best version of you and how you can make yourself to be not just a good person for yourself, but for the community as well.
I think that's very well said.
No, absolutely. That I agree with you. I think we have been great at innovation and technology. There's great intelligence out there as a collective and as a human race. What we're lacking, and what I call the ancient sad, because they didn't have the technology, and some can argue about intelligence, but they had great modicums and the great vaults of wisdom that was passed on from generation to generation for the civilization to exist and survive. A lot of wisdom was passed on, whether it was from word to mouth or whether it was through finally the written word and yada yada. And as things get easier for us, as I can take a picture of myself and then write on an AI app, make me look like a dwarf warlord, and it does something to that extent, we kind of forget about the wisdom. Is it right to do something, or is it wrong to do something? Am I making the best and how do you become the best version of yourself? Well, a lot of that is wisdom. It's understanding, how to act, how to react, how to observe and listen, and also what your impact is on others. And it just brightens me up talking to you, Ben, that there is an organization as like DeMolay for boys at the age of 12 to 21, that there is a place where anyone basically, any boy voted through can join. There's a cost of a $35 fee, which is a life fee, and they really get stuck in and really get involved. And that to me is I can't wait for my boy he's 7, and I can't wait for him to enter his application when he's 12 and get stuck in and gets involved. And I think the world needs more of this, as, in my opinion, we're lacking desperately. Our bank reserves and wisdom is drying up, although we have immense intelligence, and that shows through our advancements in technology. And I think there is a breakage and link of the family where a lot of that was passed down, and less of it now. And with the challenges families have now in the world in terms of jobs and shift works and the kids getting to school and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting, and I think, especially in order named after, I believe, Jacques de Molay, one of the Knights Templar. Some say the last Knights Templar Grand Master. However, there are people disputing that the order continued well after Jacques de Molay. But that's for an absolute separate discussion when we get to the historical parts of the podcast. But it's such a pleasure to have you on, and we've just kind of like touched a bit on DeMolay, and this is more of an introduction. Is it okay if we can have you back and maybe come to one of your conferences and maybe do a recording with people there and get to know, so the world gets to know more about DeMolay and a lot of the good work it does? And hey, if we happen to get 1, 2, 20, who knows in the future, God forbid, a couple of 100 boys into DeMolay in the state of Illinois and other states around the United States, I don't think that's a bad thing. So what do you say, Ben?
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I would be more than happy to do another episode with you guys. I would be more than happy to get some of my friends or even other jurisdictional or state master counselors. If you'd like to have us on, we would be more than happy to participate.
Well, anything we can do to bring more knowledge to this and bring more attention to it, and possibly maybe Masons would want their kids to be involved in this. I don't know who wouldn't. Mm-hmm. Or, somebody, just random person hearing this and say, well, my son could join that. So let me ask you this, and then we're going to let you go, because we try to keep in 30 minutes. I think we're pretty close there. But so you went on and become a Master Mason.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of DeMolay boys that I talk to, they take the DeMolay experience and they just go on into life then, and then maybe they think later on they'll join Masonry, and sometimes they just go on with life and they just use the rewards they had as a DeMolay, and it helps them through life, and they just never look back. So what made you decide to go ahead and join Masonry as opposed to just say just going on with life and saying, I'm having a great experience here with DeMolay, and that's all I wanted?
So there were a lot of factors for me. As I had mentioned before, I've been around Masonry before I was a DeMolay. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of love for the fraternity, even separate from my DeMolay experience with it. I think ultimately what made me want to continue my journey was my father, who I mentioned a little bit earlier that he died when I was 13. And the men who stepped up in my life were Masons. They were his brothers, and they are now my brothers. But at the time, they were his brothers. They had no responsibility to me or my family. They had no need to do what they did and to affect me as much as they have. And they stepped in when I lost my father, and here I am today. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, that's what, for the people out there listening that aren't Masons, that's what we're called to do. To help families, that especially our brothers. And, when you find out a brother's in need as a Mason, your job is to go out of your way, do whatever you can to help that family.
Yeah, and I think that's what ultimately made me want to become a Master Mason. Was I want to give back to the community that has given so much to me. And that is the reoccurring theme of why I wanted to continue serving. Was I want to give back. I want to give back to the people who have given so much to me. I want to, as Sam would put it, give my wisdom, give the wisdom that was given to me and pass it on. Continue that reoccurring message of truth and brotherly love.
That's excellent. So let me ask you this, and this will be my final thought. What would you like to say to somebody out there that was, thinking about getting involved with either the DeMolay or the Master Masons or any of the other bodies? What would you say? What would be your wisdom to give those people?
If you're unsure, ask someone. I mean, if you're unsure, ask, another Mason. Ask your mom. Ask your mom if she thinks, an organization that is meant to better you is worth joining. Because when you word it like that, it sounds like a no-brainer. It's, an organization meant to better me as a man. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? Right. And if you ever doubt it, if you're ever unsure, there's plenty of people you can find who will be more than happy to tell you how much they love this organization. And if you ask the right questions, you will always find the right way.
Okay, well, I would like to tell you thank you very much for spending your time with us this evening. And you know what? Hopefully somebody will get as much out of it as we did, because I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you for listening to On the Level Podcast, your Masonic podcast. When you are ready, duly and truly prepared, you can always knock on the door.